Hello, and welcome to Nothing Ever Happens in Canada, and I'm Canadian Girl. Thanks for joining me tonight. Grab your flashlight, a warm coat, and maybe even something hot to drink. We're about to take a tour of the most haunted city in Canada, Kingston, Ontario. We're going to stop by places like the old Rockwood Asylum, the historic Fort Henry, and McBurney Park, which is better known as Skeleton Park. All are known to have unexpected guests at times, so do keep your eyes open. Now let's get going. The sun is just about to set, and our tour is about to begin in the most haunted city, Kingston, Ontario. Kingston, Ontario was established in 1673, a Canadian city located between Toronto and Montreal, known as the Limestone City for its historical 19th century buildings. It sits overlooking Lake Ontario. Many believe the presence of limestone and water brings about paranormal activity. Just remember this as we continue on with our tour. First, we stop at the Prince George Hotel, built in 1809 and made of limestone. Sitting downtown next to City Hall at 200 Ontario Street in the historic Market Square, it is also recognized by the Ontario Heritage Foundation. And her most famous feature? A guest that's never left. Originally, the hotel was a house. In the early 1800s, the Herchmer family lived there with their daughter Lily. Lily fell in love with a sailor, which her parents did not approve of. And so the story goes, she lit a lantern in her window on nights when it was okay for them to meet, disobeying her parents' orders. One night, the lantern blew over in a gust of wind that came through an open window. Lily was asleep at the time, and the upper floors and Lily were lost in the disaster. In 1846, the house was converted into shops, a warehouse, and some business places. Then in January 1848, there was another fire that destroyed part of the building. It wasn't until mid-19th century, after many renovations, she became the Prince George Hotel. To this day, it is said Lily still haunts the upper floors. When the Prince George Hotel was in operation, beds were known to shake, disappear. A young lady would be seen peering out the upper windows and wandering the hallways. Second window from the right, third floor, is where Lily can often be seen, watching ships in the harbor. Oh, that's right, this limestone building has a view of the water. Remember that. Lily has also been known to turn radios on and off, slam doors on cleaning staff, and light candles. She is said to be the original house owner's daughter, but mysteriously, all records of her have disappeared. In 2003, friends from the website Hauntings Research Group actually stayed at the Prince George Hotel for a night. Being paranormal researchers, they brought cameras and audio equipment to capture everything. While they were out of their room, They recorded audio of someone rummaging around through their stuff, though they reported no one could be seen. 2 people also claimed their beds to be shaking in the night. And at 3:30 a.m., one of the friends was woken from their sleep, saying they heard a hand slap on the window. When they reviewed the recordings, they had indeed caught the noise, and as well, you could hear a hand slapping on the window. You can read all about their experience below. I will include a link to their page. It was really quite fascinating. There was yet another fire in the hotel in 2004, and prior to its starting, staff claimed that candles kept lighting themselves all over the hotel's upper floors. It eventually started on the 3rd floor, where Lily is often seen. Today, the 200-year-old hotel rooms have actually been renovated to loft-style apartments and are mostly occupied by Queen's University students. The lower floor is home to an Irish pub named Tir Nan Og, and an English pub known as the Speckled Hen, and also Monte's Lounge, a martini bar. The Irish pub claims to have seen sightings of a sailor and a young lady throughout its time at the hotel. It also claims that many strange things have happened over the years that just can't be explained. There is also said to be an apparition that hangs around in the old hotel lobby that will still greet you as you enter the building, and just as you turn your head to scan the room, when you look back, she is gone. The other 2 spirits that are well known can be found in the maze of tunnels located below the building. Stories claim there are spirits roaming the tunnels below, one possibly of a rum runner, as the tunnels used to be used for such, and the other is said to be that of a young boy. The tunnels today are closed to the public due to safety concerns, but they are rampant throughout the downtown and connecting most city buildings surrounding City Hall. I could find very little written history on them. I would be curious to find out more. Do let me know if you know anything about the mysterious tunnel maze underneath Kingston, Ontario. The Prince George Hotel's uninvited guest is so famous, she has even been featured on the American TV show Ghost Hunters. Now turn your flashlights on. It's starting to get dark, and we're off to Fort Henry, Kingston's most famous National Historic Site that is said to be haunted. Watch your step as we are about to enter Fort Henry, located at Point Henry on an elevated location, strategically a good spot on the east end of Lake Ontario. The fort was built in 1812 to protect the Kingston Royal Navy. There are many haunted rooms in this National Historic Site. Flashlights ready? We're about to look at some. The bakery is a local favorite. Claims say it is home to a poltergeist, which is a very loud, playful spirit that does not show itself, but he can be heard running and laughing throughout the kitchen. Do you hear anything? The hallways and the corridors have reports of numerous apparitions being seen, most in soldier-like fashion and in many different locations. There have been many souls lost at this fort. One Fort Henry Drive was once a wartime prison. German, Austrian, and Turkish prisoners were held from 1837 to 38. One of those prisoners was Nils Schultz. Schultz is one of the fort's most famous ghosts. His room of choice, Commander Room Number 3. He can often be seen moving objects or just moving around the room in his tattered uniform. Some guests have even fainted just entering the room. In 1838, Schultz was hung for treason. He tried to attack the British with 200 other men, but was cornered in a cabin close to Niagara Falls. Once he ran out of ammunition, he continued to shoot bolts, hinges, and nails before finally surrendering. Schultz to this day refuses to surrender as he seems trapped, wandering Fort Henry for eternity. John Gunner Smith is our next most known ghost. He was a rifleman who worked at the fort. One day, a rifle malfunctioned on Gunner. He is often seen today at the main gate at the front, clutching his wounds and asking for help. Deep underneath this limestone fort are what are known as the underground chambers. Nils Schultz was tried and pled guilty in the underground and was sentenced to be hanged. Some believe he can still be seen wandering the tunnels along with many other spirits. That's right, more underground tunnels, just like the Prince George Hotel. And it's made out of limestone. Interesting. A fun fact, every Halloween, Fort Henry is transformed into Fort Fright. Actors, lighting effects, and animatronics are used to scare all. It is known as the most haunted attraction in Kingston. It is also recognized as one of the most haunted houses in North America. If you're in the area, check it out. It sounds quite frightening. For this next stop, you might want to turn your flashlights off, as you may see things you don't want to. We're off to McBurney Park, better known as Skeleton Park. Welcome to Skeleton Park. Now let's go back to 1813 and learn its history. This is Kingston's earliest and largest cemetery, also known as the Upper Cemetery. It's estimated that roughly 10,000 bodies were buried. Considered a mass grave, the site was used during epidemics. In 1864, it was finally closed due to capacity. After that, it was left abandoned. Graves were vandalized and robbed. Queen's University students were often accused of it as they needed cadavers for their studies. There was even a criminal ring at the time, known as the Resurrectionists. They sold bodies to the students and would fill the coffins back up with rocks to prevent the graves from sagging to hide their crimes. They also sold to medical students in Toronto, Montreal, and New York. Montreal at the time was actually known as the grave robbing capital. After many years, the cemetery became a grazing ground for cattle. Tombstones were trampled over and squashed into the ground. It's said children would find bones and play with them in the neighborhood. In 1880, an attempt was made to move the mass grave by the city, but due to the soil conditions, bodies were not yet fully decomposed, and there was fear of diseases re-spreading. A gruesome choice was made to bury the cemetery and build a park. Today, the 4-acre park northeast of downtown Kingston has many stories. In 1992, a femur bone was found off of Alma Street. In 2004, a landscape renewal project done in the Alma Street area discovered some unknown burial plots. Since then, the cemetery is suspected to be bigger than once thought, and buildings in the area are most likely built on top of it. Therefore, an archaeologist must be present when building anything new that requires digging into untouched ground that has not been previously excavated or disturbed. Children have been known to play baseball using headstone pieces as bases. In 2007, Alma Street area, the road where the burial plots were found was changed to a one-way to provide respect to the unknown plots below the road and create less traffic on the street. Many spirits are seen in the area. There are stories of people looking out their windows or stepping outside to have a look and seeing a foggy mist and a graveyard peering out of it, only to look again and have it vanish. Voices are often heard in the park, but no one is around, and a mist is often seen in photos that was not there when the photo was taken. Neighboring houses also state seeing uninvited guests in their houses that disappear as fast as they show up. Today there is a monument marking the grave site. Tips and corners of tombstones tend to pop up here and there after a good spring thaw. A perfect spot for a picnic, don't you think? I'm just kidding. All right, we're out of the mist and back on the main streets and on our way to Lower Rideau Street. Here we find an old stone apartment building said to be haunted by school children. A tenant who once lived there claimed to hear muffled cries and schoolroom noises. After doing some investigating, she found out in the early 1800s it was in fact a school, until it was mostly destroyed by a fire. Several children were lost in that accident. The tenant moved out shortly after this. We've been up close to all these limestone buildings, but let's go take a look at the water. In fact, we're off to discover the secret of what's hiding in Deadman's Bay. Zip your coat up tight. The breeze off the bay is a bit chilly tonight. We're at 9 Morton Street, a National Historic Site, and we're standing on the edge of Deadman's Bay. It's 1847, and Robert James is building the Martello Tower on Cedar Island with a crew of men. They saw a storm come in and tried to make it back across the bay before it rolled in. Unfortunately, the boat capsized and of the 23 men on board, only 4 survived. One of those men would 26 years later be the second Prime Minister of Canada, Alexander Mackenzie. Unfortunately, Robert James did not. His fiancée Elizabeth James is said to have died of a broken heart. The new crew that was hired to finish building the Martello Tower on Cedar Island reported seeing a woman wandering around who would just vanish. There are many reports of a woman wandering the shores looking for something. Some have even claimed to see a man and a woman walking together. So why is Deadman's Bay a National Historic Site, you ask? And what's her big secret? Shipwrecks. That's right, it's Shipwreck City, and we talked about it in my last podcast. If you went on that scuba dive with me, you'll remember we saw the HMS St. Lawrence, a 112-gun, first-rate wooden warship from 1812. She served the Royal Navy on Lake Ontario. Then there is the Princess Charlotte, a Royal Navy 42-gun, fifth-rate ship from 1814, and the Prince Regan, a British warship from 1814 with 56 guns. Parts of these ships are so close to the water's surface they can be touched with one's oar. Many people have also seen abnormal lights and people who just vanish along the shore. They've also claimed to see ghost ships sailing in the harbor. Rumor has it they're out looking for more souls to join their crew. So we better get going to our next stop. Welcome to the Frontenac Courthouse, a limestone building with a view of Lake Ontario and a National Historic Site famous for its hangings. That's right, people came as far away as New York to watch the hangings at this courthouse. It was highly publicized in the papers at the time and became almost like an attraction. Local hotels were packed days before a hanging was scheduled. It brought in great revenue for local businesses. After the hangings, the bodies were buried nearby, and to this day it is not known where all the bodies are located now. A parking lot was built next to the courthouse some many years later, which allowed for some of the bodies to be recovered and reburied. Voices are often heard, but no one is seen in the parking lot. The most common apparition was of a well-dressed man seen leaning against the wall surrounding the parking lot. When it was eventually torn down, a coffin was found inside, and its remains contained a well-dressed man. It was removed and reburied properly, and the man's apparition was never seen again. There is also a rumor of a silhouette of a hanging that can be seen on the courthouse wall during a full moon. Thankfully, we just missed the full moon the other night, so I won't be checking this one out for you. Now we're off to meet the most famous ghost of them all. Right near Rochelot Court is a maze of alleys and pathways known as the Secret Alley. For locals, it's behind local business known as Chez Piggy and the Toucan. The maze of pathways, of course, is made of limestone, and Kingston's most famous ghost, Teresa Ignace, is known to be wandering about asking anyone who will listen to help find her bones. In 1868, the story goes, Teresa was murdered by her lover, John Napier, in the alleyway. Many people have used a Ouija board to try and communicate with her. She always relays the same message, that her bones are buried in the basement of an adjacent store. She seems to be trapped in the alley until her bones are found. Many locals report she is also carrying a cross. It doesn't seem like Teresa is around tonight, so let's keep moving. Our next stop is known as the terrifying Kingston Pen. The Kingston Penitentiary was built in 1883, also known as Canada's Alcatraz or the Pen. It has housed some of Canada's most dangerous offenders. The first maximum security prison at its time in the area. Today, there are 10. 6 are still in operation, making Kingston not only the most haunted city in Canada, it also owns the title for Penitentiary Capital of the World. Some of the prisoners to note that were kept on the famous E Block that is said to be still haunted today: Paul Bernardo, Wayne Bowden, Clifford Olson, Mohammed Shafia, and wrongfully convicted Stephen Truscott and Guy Paul Moran. Men, women, and children as young as 8 years old have been prisoners here. The prison was famous for riots. 3 major ones occurred in 1931, 1954, and 1971. Many guards and inmates were killed during these. In 2013, the prison was closed and later on became a tourist destination. 180 years later, guards are often still seen doing their rounds. Prisoners are seen wandering about, and a prisoner named George Hewell, who was known to be very violent towards the guards. In 1897, a guard struck back in self-defense, and as Hewell laid there dying, he vowed to get revenge. He has been spotted several times in the prison. He must still be trying to find his revenge, as he has not been able to leave yet. If the prison is finally closed, then why aren't the prisoners leaving? Maybe it's the 2 massive limestone pillars at the entrance. Does that keep the spirits inside? What do you think? Next, and our last stop, is the Rockwood Asylum, where a doctor was murdered. We're going to need our flashlights, for sure. The Rockwood Asylum has been closed since 1995. It was built in 1859 by the Kingston inmates. The asylum opened in 1862 to house the criminally insane from the Kingston Pen. It is made of limestone and overlooks Lake Ontario. It was thought to have a calming effect on its patients. Limestone and water again. Dr. William Metcalf was given the task of converting the asylum for the criminally insane to a hospital for those that were mentally ill. He developed a more humane way to treat his patients and had an open-door policy to increase a sense of freedom for his patients. While doing rounds with Dr. C.K. Clark on August 13, 1885, Dr. Metcalf was stabbed in the abdomen by Patrick Maloney, a patient suffering from paranoia. The patient was charged with murder when Dr. Metcalf passed away 3 days later due to his injuries. The most commonly reported apparition, a stately-looking man on the upper floors in 19th century doctor's attire, seen patrolling the hallways and going in and out of patient rooms, making his rounds. My hot chocolate is gone, my toes are getting cold, and I'm out of ghost stories to tell for now. It's almost midnight, and I don't know about you, but being out after midnight in the most haunted city in Canada is not something I want to do. So I hope you enjoyed our haunted tour, and you can get some sleep tonight. If you have any ghost stories you want to share with me, I'd love to hear them. You can find me on most social media at Nothing Canada. Happy Halloween, everybody. I'm Canadian Girl. Until next time. I just want to take a second to give a huge shout out and thank you to Northern Mama Bear. She gave us our first comment and 5-star rating on iTunes, and I couldn't appreciate it more. So thanks again, Northern Mama Bear. Want to help support the show? You can do that in 3 simple ways. The first one, you can leave us a shiny 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. This small gesture means so much to this podcast as it allows us to move around on the podcast charts and meet more awesome listeners like you. The second, you can stop by our souvenir shop and pick up a souvenir from one of our great adventures and take it on your very own. There's t-shirts, water bottles, notebooks, and so much more. Do head over to our souvenir shop today and grab some adventure gear. And finally, the third way you can help support the show is by donation. We have a fancy PayPal button that can be found on the top right of our webpage. This button allows you the option to donate as much as you want, whenever you want. All donations will be used for the channel by buying new books for research, paying for the podcast website, and upgrading equipment. All 3 links to help support the show, of course, can be found in the show notes below. I thank you all so much for your support of the show. It means the world to me.